Our second reading this morning is from the book of Genesis, chapter 9, verses 1 through 7. God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth. The fear and dread of you shall rest on every animal of the earth, and on every bird of the air, on everything that creeps on the ground, and on all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they are delivered. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. And just as I gave you the green plants, I give you everything. Only you shall not eat the flesh with its life, that is, its blood. For your own lifeblood I will surely require a reckoning. From every animal I will require it, and from human beings, each one for the blood of another. I will require a reckoning for human life. Whoever sheds the blood of a human by a human, shall that person's blood be shed. For in his own image God made humankind. And you, be fruitful and multiply, abound on the earth and multiply in it." One day, a mouse looked through the crack in the wall to see the farmer and his wife open a package. What food might this contain, the mouse wondered. He was devastated to discover it was a mousetrap. Retreating to the farmyard, the mouse proclaimed the warning, "There is a mousetrap in the house! There is a mousetrap in the house!" The chicken clucked and scratched, raised her head and said, "Mr. Mouse, I can tell this is a grave concern to you, but it is of no consequence to me. I cannot be bothered by it." The mouse turned to the pig and told him, "There's a mousetrap in the house. There's a mousetrap in the house." The pig sympathized, but said, "I am so very sorry, Mr. Mouse, but there's nothing I can do about it but pray. Be assured you are in my prayers." The mouse turned to the cow and said, "There's a mousetrap in the house. There's a mousetrap in the house." The cow said, "Wow, Mr. Mouse, I'm sorry for you, but it's no skin off my nose." So the mouse returned to the house, head down and dejected, to face the farmer's mousetrap alone. That very night, a sound was heard throughout the house, like the sound of a mousetrap catching its prey. The farmer's wife rushed to see what was caught. In the darkness, she did not see that it was a venomous snake whose tail the trap had caught. The snake bit the farmer's wife. The farmer rushed her to the hospital, and she returned home with a fever. Well, everyone knows that you treat a fever with fresh chicken soup, so the farmer took his hatchet to the farmyard for the soup's main ingredient. But the wife's sickness continued, so friends and neighbors came to sit with her around the clock. Well, to feed them, the farmer had to butcher the pig. The farmer's wife did not get well. She died. So many people came for her funeral that the farmer had the cow slaughtered to provide enough meat for them all. The mouse looked upon it all from his crack in the wall with great sadness. So the next time you hear someone is facing a problem and think that it doesn't concern you, remember, when one of us is threatened, we are all at risk. Today, I have set aside the narrative lectionary in favor of creation care. I know that most of us are preoccupied with the upcoming midterm election, and I know that there is a lot at stake right now. But in the midst of all of the noise, I cannot help but notice the disturbing sound of silence coming from the direction of climate change, and that worries me. I hear all kinds of noise being made over immigration. Half the country wants to build a wall to keep the other out, while the other half wants to extend compassion and hospitality to our suffering neighbors. It is, according to Scripture, our responsibility to love our neighbors. It is our responsibility to welcome the stranger and to care for the widows and the orphans. And even without biblical mandates, welcoming the tired, the poor, and the huddled masses is the foundation of everything that this country stands for. But there is a much bigger issue at stake and a far deeper question that needs to be asked. Why are people fleeing their homes in the first place? The media will tell you that people are running from crime and corruption. Political scientists will direct your attention to policies such as the Central American Free Trade Agreement. And those are certainly big contributing factors. But what about droughts, hurricanes, floods, and mudslides? The focus on violence is eclipsing the big picture, but if you listen closely to what the migrants themselves are saying, most of them say the same thing. They're moving because they don't have anything to eat, and that is linked to climate change. Climate scientists refer to Central America as ground zero for climate change in the Americas. One report predicts that by the year 2050, 1 in 10 Mexicans will be displaced due to climate-related hazards, and global projections range anywhere from 150 million to 1 billion people. Can we handle an additional 1 billion people? No, we cannot. But as we chew up more and more of our resources, people are being squeezed out of their homes, and they have to go somewhere. So regardless of where you land on the political spectrum, it all comes down to the same thing. If you love your neighbor, you don't pollute their air. If you want to stem the flow of immigration, you don't abuse their resources. And as people of faith, we should be on the leading edge of the environmental movement, because we know that to do these things is to sin against creation. Everything that God created matters, and we and our behavior matter too. God created everything that is and called it good, and we have a responsibility to see that it stays that way. In Genesis, God put Adam in the garden to care for it, to till it, and to keep it. Later, God told Noah to be fruitful and multiply, and abound on the earth and multiply in it. And then Jesus said, "What you do for the least of us, you do to me." The poor, the immigrant, the widow, the orphan, the ones who contribute the least to environmental problems are the ones who are suffering the most. But even here in the U.S., we are starting to discernibly notice the effects of climate change. We're pretty lucky here in Wisconsin. There are many parts of the country where people are dying of heat. Crops are rotting either from flooding or they're dying on the vine for the lack of water. Fires are raging in Colorado, Texas, and New Mexico. Half of this country is over 100 degrees, and scientists say that this is only the beginning. It isn't too late, though. We can turn the trend around. With new technology emerging every day, there is hope. Renewable energy is showing up in imaginative and creative ways. Jobs are being created, and people are driving smaller cars and using energy more efficiently. But we have to come together and work together, all of us, if we're to have any kind of a lasting impact. And these days, that almost seems impossible. Almost. 48 years ago, in response to many environmental challenges, 20 million Americans gathered in schools, universities, and communities to proclaim the very first Earth Day. Modern environmentalism stepped into the forefront following that first Earth Day. New laws were passed. Businesses and local governments made significant changes. We saw rivers, lakes, and drinking water and air quality improvements. Old dumps turned into sanitary landfills, and people started changing their habits. I remember when I was a little girl, everyone threw their trash right out the window of their car. They just tossed it out like it didn't make any difference at all. We thought nothing of it. Eating a bag of chips, toss out the trash. And the country was a mess. But then Lady Bird Johnson started a campaign to clean up the whole country, and littering laws were enacted. At the time, it seemed really ridiculous. It was a hard habit to change. But we did change. And now, if someone throws trash out of the window, we practically do a citizen's arrest. We are horrified. We changed. One by one, we changed and we cleaned up this whole country. And we can do that again. How, you might ask? Well, together would be my answer. The church is critical. Moral leadership sits right here with us. As religious people, we must do our part. If we don't protect creation, then how can we possibly expect others to? Our job is to stay informed, to do our part, and to vote for public officials who understand that we cannot be the healthy children that God intended, nor will we live on a healthy planet unless we can get beyond partisanship and do what is right for the entire creation of life, the creation that God called good, the creation where God put Adam and said, till. But we also have to set an example. We have to practice what we preach, not just as individuals, but as a church. We need to incorporate more sustainable practices in our personal lives and in our community life. We have a wonderful old church where we come to worship. It is beautiful, and our sanctuary is truly a sanctuary. But old buildings are not energy efficient buildings, and this building is certainly no exception. The fuels used to keep our building warm and lit are finite, dirty, and dangerous. And the time has come to switch to clean, renewable energy that comes from sun and wind, geothermal, and other resources that don't pollute the air with carbon dioxide and other harmful gases. Well, that sounds expensive, you might be thinking, and you would be right. With all of our stewardship and budget concerns, updating to renewable energy probably seems like a pretty low priority right now. But what if there was money available for making these changes? We'd get right on it, wouldn't we? Well, there is money available. And if you will join me today at noon at Grace Lutheran, we can find out how to access it. I have been working with representatives from Wisconsin Interfaith Power and Light and Renew Wisconsin to set up a luncheon event where we can learn how to make this work. This is an interfaith ecumenical event to which all of the area churches have been invited, and I would like for as many of you as possible to show up and accompany me today. Out of this, it is my hope that we can form a green team to work together towards finding ways that we can make our building more energy efficient. The money is available. We just have to show up and learn how to make use of it. Every one of our actions and behavior affects someone else on the planet. Our individual choices matter, but we need every institution, every industry, every business, every industrial utility, every hospital, and every school to be looking ahead at what we are leaving behind for our children and our grandchildren to deal with. And the church is called to lead. 3 times, Jesus commanded Peter to feed my sheep. Certainly, this feeding refers to the spiritual food of the gospel and the Eucharist, but it also extends to the literal, physical sense that we must feed our sisters and brothers who are hungry. And even more importantly, we are called to do everything in our power to make sure that people around the world are not starving due to our behavior here. If global warming is extending droughts and people are unable to find or grow food, we have a responsibility to change. I hope that you will join me today. Amen.